Hello, welcome to the France 24 interview. President Donald J. Trump, what once might have seemed like a joke is suddenly no laughing matter. The real estate mogul and reality TV star continues to dispatch heavyweight rivals, including most recently Jeb Bush, with alarming ease. And his party is looking on in a little bit of horror. Some have likened his campaign to a hostile takeover of the Republican Party. And it's a takeover that the party itself has so far been powerless to stop. But is Trump really invincible? Well, my guest today knows as much about what it takes to make or break a presidential run as just about anyone in Washington. Stuart Stevens is a writer and a political consultant, and he's also a former top strategist for Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign. And his roster of clients over the years reads like a who's who of U.S. politics, from Bob Dole to George W. Bush to even John McCain. Thank you for joining me. I'll note for our viewers that you're joining us from Quebec in Canada today, not from Washington. Stuart, I want to cut to the chase. Yeah, I want to cut right to the chase here. You gave an interview to New York Magazine in September of last year, not that long ago, and you were asked about the prospect of a President Trump, and you were pretty categorical. You said, no way, no how. It would mean that all the rules of politics would have to change. Do you still stand by that answer? No President Trump?
I don't think Donald Trump is going to be elected. I think we have to face facts that he could be the Republican nominee. Which I think is very problematic on all kinds of levels for the party and for the country, and to a certain degree the world. But I don't think Donald Trump is going to win an election in the United States for president.
But let me ask you this. You know, everyone keeps saying that. You pundits, politicians, and every time they've made a prediction, it turns out that they've been sort of caught out on it. What gives you the confidence to say, I mean, does Donald Trump really take anyone's advice, even his own campaign advisors? He only really seems to listen to himself. How do you even begin to stop him?
Well, last night there was a debate here in the United States in Texas before the next round of primaries. And for the first time, two of his opponents, Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, really went after Donald Trump in the way that candidates should have been going after Donald Trump from the very beginning. They laid out an argument that he's really not a business success. This is a man who inherited great wealth. Had he invested his wealth in the stock market, he'd be much wealthier than he is today. And he has a history of very questionable business practices. So that argument began to be laid last night. I am stunned that it has not happened before. I think it should have happened before. I don't think Donald Trump is some invincible candidate. I think that he has benefited from a large field that, for reasons that they can explain better than I can, they have focused on who's going to lose to Donald Trump instead of who's going to beat Donald Trump.
Let me ask you this. We keep hearing this sort of narrative, this conventional wisdom that Donald Trump has been made possible by the anger, this grassroots, anti-establishment, anti-party elite sort of constituency out there. What do you make of the argument also put forward by some in the U.S. that Trump is a creation of the Republican Party? He has come about, he's sort of like the Frankenstein's monster of the party, and his candidacy is the comeuppance for the Republicans.
I think it's like a lot of things. There's some truth in both. Look, despite the stock market being up and despite all the happy talk out of the White House, the vast majority of Americans are very stressed economically. 23% of the country, only 23%, believe that the country is headed in the right direction. If you listen to what's coming out of the Democratic primary, for the first time in American history, you have a socialist, Bernie Sanders, who's doing very well. In fact, he beats everybody in a head-to-head match, all the Republicans and Hillary Clinton in a head-to-head match. And I think that reflects a deep, not only anger, but troubled and fear that is going on in America right now. And Trump has been capitalizing on
He's
that.
been capitalizing on it. Let me, I'll just hit you with one statistic that I read. It sort of raised my eyebrows. That almost 20% of the Republican primary voters in the recent South Carolina primary, when asked, said they were not sure that freeing the U.S. slaves after the Civil War was a good thing. Those people are voting for Donald Trump. To me, this would speak to something. I don't know. Is it bigotry or racism inbred within certain grassroots of the Republican Party?
Well, look, I never know what to do with those kind of statistics. To a certain degree, you call somebody up and you ask them about, I don't know what that means. Donald Trump isn't a Republican. Let's make this clear. I mean, he's not really ever been involved in Republican Party politics. He's a wealthy guy who lives on Fifth Avenue, who hangs out with a lot of wealthy people.
But he could be the Republican nominee.
He's donated $100,000 to Hillary Clinton's foundation, and he could be. No, but I'm just trying to say that I think that what he's tapping into is larger than any sort of Republican Party establishment or Republican Party element. It's really not about party. It's about America. And look, I think Donald Trump is selling, in many ways, a message of hate. And it's something that we see across Europe that has a certain appeal. And it's not immune to it here. I think it's shameful. I think it's ugly. I think it should be defeated.
You say you think it should be defeated. Let me ask you now, just to put your sort of strategist's cap on for a second. If I were to ask you, what does the Republican Party leadership, looking at the way this race is shaping up right now, do you embrace a Donald Trump? Do they accept it and hope they'll have some leverage over his platform? Or do they right now try plotting a strategy to bring him down? And if so, how do you even do that?
That's a really, really, really smart question. The parties in the United States, they're not anything but loose social organizations of people that come together. They're not anything in the Constitution about political parties. They're not creations of the federal government. And the rules of the party are really up to whatever the party wants to make them. I think that if Donald Trump wins the Republican nomination, and he's gone out there and he's competed in these races and he has enough delegates and he's the Republican nomination, I think it's going to be very hard for the Republican Party not to say that he has won. So Stuart Stevens, which is one of the reasons it's terrible for the Republican Party.
Could you help spell it out for our viewers a little bit? In other words, if he gets, mathematically, he gets the delegates after Super Tuesday, the first one, the second one, he has those delegates, and you get to that convention in July, if he has the delegates, you can't really stop him, right? I mean, unless you have a brokered convention?
Yes, if he has the delegates, he's the nominee, unless somehow these delegates were to desert him. You have to understand, at the convention, there are a set of rules that govern the operation, how people vote, how it'll be selected. But the wild card is you could convene the convention. The first vote could be to throw out all the rules, which has sort of happened before at various moments. So we really have to look at probably what has happened in the past, what is most likely to happen. If Donald Trump gets these delegates, he is going to be the Republican nominee in all likelihood. Now, there is a scenario where he may not have enough delegates. And then you're into a world of what I think is improperly called a brokered convention, because that implies that there's any brokers. It's really a deadlock convention. And that would be an incredible spectacle to have that fight in the convention.
Just briefly, thinking back now, not very long ago, to your former client, to Mitt Romney and his campaign, it's seeming like a rather moderate affair now. Have you had a chance to actually speak to Mitt Romney and what he sort of thinks of the prospect of the way this race is shaping up on the Republican side?
I talked to Governor Romney a good bit. I never want to be one to speak for him. But I think he definitely is not a Donald Trump guy, to say the least. He has been attempting in some ways to engage Donald Trump from the sidelines. He called him out to release his tax returns yesterday, which became a thread in the debate that was held last night. Listen, I think that Mitt Romney, someone who ran for president because he was deeply troubled about the direction of the country, and Donald Trump's solutions, such as they are terrible.
And
he really doesn't have any policy. He just kind of has emotion.
very little time left, Stuart Stevens. Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to know very briefly, if it comes down to Donald Trump as the nominee and he has to go up against Sanders or Clinton, who has a better chance on the Democratic side of seeing him off?
That's another good question. Right now, the polls show that Sanders does better than Clinton against Trump. Now, everybody says, well, that's because Sanders hasn't really gone out there and had a tough campaign run against him. I'm not sure. I think both will beat Donald Trump.
Okay, you know what? I'm not gonna push you anymore on that question. I know that pundits have all been proven wrong, strategists have been proven wrong, politicians have been proven wrong in this campaign, a campaign that has torn up the playbook of traditional campaigns. But I thank you for taking your time today, Stuart Stevens, former strategist for Mitt Romney in 2012, and a long list of governors and senators in Washington. Thanks again, and I assume you're going to stand by your prediction that Donald Trump will not be the next president of the United States of America.
I'm going to stand there until it's proven not to be true.
Very good. We'll leave it at that. Thanks again, and thanks to all of you for watching the interview here on France 24.